What do we owe one another when hate walks into the room? Silence, violence, or a steady hand? On most mornings, Dr. Maya Jefferson unlocked room B112 the same way she had done for 3 quiet years. Twist of the brass key, nudge with her shoulder that stuck at the frame, light switch flicked up with the back of a knuckle. She moved like someone who had choreographed the first minutes of her day to rehearse calm. Coffee on the desk, phone face down, lab log open to the dog-eared page where her students signed in, a small practical ceremony that told them science was not magic but a record. The lab smelled faintly of ethanol and lemon hand soap, the scent of discipline. Posters lined the cinder block walls, anatomy charts, pipetting tips, the cell cycle poster that had survived 3 chairs, 1 flood, and 2 budget freeze years. On the back shelf stood a tea kettle and a price-tagged jar of peppermints for students who got woozy during dissections. Above the sink, a faded photograph showed a dozen teenagers in goggles grinning around Maya, hands raised in V for victory signs because they had finally gotten their gel bands to appear in perfect ladders. Maya was the first black faculty member hired in the department in 15 years. She did not announce this fact because it was printed on the air already, not heavy, just present, like humidity. She wore a small gold stud in each ear and a watch whose face had survived deployments. The watch reminded her to measure things: time, temperature, tone. That was Maya's flaw if you pressed her. She trusted measurements so fiercely that she avoided confrontations she couldn't instrument. She sidestepped the meetings that turned to rumour. She ignored the sideways comments, telling herself they were statistically insignificant outliers. She anchored her life to the hypothesis that competence would be control. Her students loved her because she took them seriously. She stayed late. She made a ritual of labelling. She told stories in low, steady paragraphs, never for drama, always for use. How to keep a plate from drying out, how to ask for help before an experiment failed, how humility was a tool like any other. Those who knew her beyond the lab also knew she had served 8 years as an army medic. She didn't make a banner of it, but when students asked about scars, she told them they were notes written by life. That Tuesday, campus was a bustle of cardboard boxes and orientation maps. The new cohort wandered past, B112, trailing parents and hopes. The returning students looked like veterans of a war against sleep. It was Club Fair Day, which meant free pizza on the quad and a brassy optimism over the PA. Maya's second-year molecular biology students were due at 10. At 9:57, the hallway filled with lightly competitive laughter. He entered at 9:59. His name was Todd Riker, a junior who had transferred mid-year. He wore a ball cap with a logo that skewed aggressively nostalgic. He'd emailed her the week before to ask about testing out of the early labs. His high school had a cutting-edge biotech program, he said, and he was eager to level up. His tone had been more assumption than question. Maya had replied with her usual clarity. Everyone started with safety. Everyone earned their way forward. She would be glad to see what he could do in practice. Dr. J, he said now, cutting to the front of the sign-in table. He didn't smile when he said it. He placed his palms on the list and leaned. I'll take bench 1. Good morning, Maya said, moving her pen to the side so his hand wouldn't smudge her own notes. In this room, benches are assigned alphabetically for the first 2 weeks. Find your card. He ignored the cards. He stepped toward the centrifuge and popped the lid, testing it with the smooth arrogance of someone who liked to see what would bend. I said I'd take bench 1. Names go by the door, Maya said, still even. She had learned, in triage tents and faculty lounges alike, how not to add heat to foolishness. Please read the board. We'll start together. A few students glanced from the open centrifuge to Maya's face and back again, reading the moment the way dogs read weather. Jules, a sophomore who had once sobbed in this room after a failed midterm, curled her fingers around her pipette like a talisman. Todd's eyes travelled the room, taking quick inventory. They snagged on the photograph above the sink. Something in his mouth tightened. "Figures," he muttered, just loud enough. "Poster child." Maya felt it then, the little click of attention in the spine that told her a story had arrived without invitation. She had seen this kind of boy before, in the army and out, the kind who mistook loudness for leadership, who had been told by some careless wind that the world was his to correct. "Phone's away," Maya said, stepping into the centre aisle. "Goggles on. If you're not at your assigned bench in 30 seconds, you'll start the lab next time." Todd's nostrils flared. He slammed the centrifuge lid so hard the machine squeaked. "You can't talk to me like that," he said, and spread his arms in a gesture that claimed the air. "I'm not one of your—" He stopped, smirked, and didn't finish the sentence. Maya let the silence stand. A room can teach if you let it. 20 seconds, she said. There is a moral choice that seems small until it grows bones. Do you appease a bully and keep the room quiet? Or do you name the line and risk the storm? Maya's floor wanted the numbers to neutralize him. A rubric, a policy, a graph that said your behavior is an outlier, therefore corrected. But the room held people, not just protocols. She lifted the clipboard and made a mark next to his name. 15, she said. Todd moved at last to the card that said Riker, Todd. He jabbed a finger at the name tag like it was a bruise. He was still smiling, but it was the smile of someone who thought of consequences as paper. Maya started the lab. The first lab of the term was simple by design. A safety review, a pipetting calibration, a demonstration of sterile technique that doubled as a ritual of care. Clean your bench like you're preparing food for someone you love, Maya would say, and the students who had never loved anyone steadier than themselves would learn something anyway. Today's experiment involved streaking plates with harmless bacteria, then incubating to see how contaminated a gloved hand could become when rules were sloppy. It was a folk test wrapped in fancy language. Do the small things right and the big things become possible. Todd sighed theatrically through most of the lecture and corrected her once on a brand name that did not matter. He made a point of asking if the room had real autoclaves or if they used the baby ones. Twice he drifted toward bench 1 again, and twice Maya's eyes moved him back. When it came time to streak the plates, Maya walked the rows, answering questions, adjusting elbows. She passed by Todd as he swabbed his gloved finger across a gar like a conductor who hadn't learned the music. He winked at Jules. Relax, he said. This is basic. Basic gets you trusted, Maya said, and left him to his theatre. She let the lesson do its work. At the back of the room, the door opened to admit Mr. Alvarez, the building custodian. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had a key to every door and used none of them loudly. He wore his baseball cap low, his tool belt high, and on his left arm the wrinkled tattoo of a swallow whose wings had weathered 40 years of mopping floors and fixing the fantasies of scientists. Good morning, Doc, Alvarez said, lifting 2 fingers in a salute that wasn't military, but might as well have been. Gonna change the filter on your fume hood. Maya nodded. We're sterile, she said, smiling, but we're not delicate. Take what you need. Mr. Alvarez had been at the college longer than most of the faculty. He had watched the light bulbs get replaced and the students do the same. When Maya had first arrived, he'd helped her wrangle a broken incubator off a pallet when the delivery folks refused to carry it inside. He had told her then, a good lab is like a good kitchen. Clean knives, warm hands, clear orders. Sometimes she thought of him as her quiet elder, sometimes as a symbolic man who embodied the everyday heroism no poster celebrates. He worked without interrupting the lesson. When he crawled under the hood to unscrew a stubborn bracket, his cap fell off. The thin white line of a scar along his hairline flashed and vanished. Todd snorted. "We're hiring handymen to precept now," he said under his breath. Maya glanced up. "We're all in service of the same science," she said. "Respect is not graded, but it's required." He rolled his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." After plates were labelled and sealed, Maya herded them into the incubator. She loved that herding was part of her ob, bringing scatter into order, turning worry into tasks. She closed the warm metal door and said, "Results Friday? Write your predictions with your names. I love being proven wrong." Todd raised his hand without waiting to be acknowledged. "I predict advanced students will outpace the rest if we're allowed to move ahead. Which we're not, because, you know." He gestured vaguely toward her and then toward the room, as if her presence were a kind of policy. Jules's cheeks pinked. Another student, Kareem, stared holes into the bench. "Today we practiced following shared rules," Maya said calmly. "Next week we practice something harder, trusting them." Todd smiled again, wider, as if he had landed something. "Sure, Dr. J." The next part of the period was clean up. Bleach spray, disposables into biohazard bins, the low, satisfying squeak of gloves, snapped off and tossed. It was then the accident, or the something, happened. Maya had turned to answer a question about lab notebooks when a shout knifed through the room. She pivoted. Todd was at the sink with Jules. He had accidentally nudged her elbow so that the flask she was rinsing clattered. The flask didn't break. But Todd took the opening. He lurched backward with pantomime shock, elbowed the shelf behind him, and knocked 3 glass Petri dishes to the floor. They shattered. The sharp sound made the room look around in one movement. "Whoa," he said, shaking his hands like a kid who wanted a crowd. "Hey, careful, lab partner." Jules stammered an apology so fast it sounded like she was choking on it. I didn't." "You did," Todd said smoothly. "But it's fine. It's her first real lab, Dr. J. Some of us grew up around this stuff at some..." He let it hang. Maya moved toward the spill. "Step back," she said, voice low. She picked up the broom from the corner and handed Jules the dustpan, with what she hoped was dignity rewritten in plastic. "Todd, go to the cabinet and get the sharps container." He stood still. "Get it," she repeated. He looked at the broom in Maya's hands, at Jules' bent shoulders. He didn't move. That's when the word came. It wasn't the worst word in the catalogue of hate, but it didn't need to be. It was said in the tone of borrowed authority, as if he had been deputized by some ancestral bully. He said it at the volume of a stage whisper, but with the blade of a slur. "Should have known they'd put," he began and finished with a sneer, "one of you in charge of clean-up." The room froze, the way a field goes still when weather flips. Kareem's knuckles whitened. Mr. Alvarez emerged from beneath the fume hood, like a carpenter god, and stood up very slowly, his cap in his hand. Maya felt the old measure break. Numbers would not help here. She set the broom down. She saw in a flash a tent in a desert, a boy torn by shrapnel, her own hands pressing gauze to blood and hearing men shout words they could never repay. In those seconds, the world felt like it had shrunk to the size of a bad idea with a mouth. "Everyone," she said, and the room heard the order in the evenness. "Stand clear of the glass. Put down your tools. Eyes here." Todd smirked and lifted his chin, ready for sport. Maya stepped forward until she was 2 feet from him. Her voice did not rise. "You will hand me the sharps container," she said. "Then you will leave this room and sit on the bench across the hall. If you don't, I will call campus security and file a conduct violation. Your grade will not save you from that paperwork. Your father's name will not file it for you. You will write an apology to your lab team and to Mr. Alvarez. Then you will decide if you want to learn in this room or pretend to. Todd laughed, a little higher than he probably wanted. Relax, he said. It's a joke. Maya's eyes didn't blink. Which part is the joke? She asked. He opened his mouth, closed it. The room did not move. It was a standoff, but not the kind he knew. He was used to contests of volume or humiliation. This was something else. It felt like someone balancing a tray of glass and waiting for him to breathe wrong. He took a step closer. A challenge. In the movement, his shoulder brushed a tray of unused slides perched on the counter. The tray wobbled. In another life, Maya would have reached for it instinctively and let him keep his swagger, to keep the peace. In this one, she let gravity do its job. The slides clinked, not broken, but unsettled, and in the sound she read his inclination. He wanted escalation. He wanted a scene he could later narrate into injury. He moved again, too fast. He put a hand on the bench near her hip and leaned in. You don't get to tell me. The physical contact was minor, but it was contact. Maya's military training had taught her 2 guiding rules. 1. De-escalate until you cannot. 2. When you must act, act clean and small. Her hands moved before thought made them clumsy. She shifted her weight, pivoted her hips, and rotated his wrist off the bench in a simple aikido angle that used his lean, not his strength. Todd's hand left the bench like a leaf leaving a stream. In the same breath, she redirected him a step to the side, so the space between his body and hers widened meaningfully. She did not grip. She did not twist beyond necessity. The movement said, you will not. To the room, it looked like a formal dance step, quick and precise. To Todd, it was an introduction to limits. Do not touch my bench, Maya said. Do not crowd my students. She did not say, do not touch me, because what mattered most was the room. Todd looked stunned, then furious. He drew back like he might shove her. He didn't, not yet, because something in her stance told him he would become the demonstration and not the victor. There are moments when pride meets training, and training wins because it doesn't flinch. You assaulted me, he said, louder, tasting the shape of accusation like sugar. Did you all see that? Mr. Alvarez, who had seen a lot of people try to rename reality, stepped up and put his hand on the broom like a judge lays fingers on a gavel. His voice was soft but had timbre. Son, he said, she turned your hand. That's restraint. Real assault looks different. Kareem exhaled in a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Across the hall, Maya repeated, nodding toward the door. Now. Todd hesitated. He took in the 12 pairs of eyes, the custodian at the broom, the teacher whose stillness had more gravity than he thought possible. He grabbed the sharps container from the cabinet in a jerky gesture and shoved it toward her chest, not touching her exactly, but throwing it like you throw something to a dog to prove it will fetch. The container wobbled in her hand. She caught it with the same steady precision she'd used to redirect him. He stepped out into the hallway with a grin that tried for swagger and managed only heat. The door swung behind him. The room breathed. Maya placed the sharps container on the counter. She lifted the broom. No one steps forward, she said. Mr. Alvarez, will you help me clear the glass? He nodded. Jewel's mouth trembled. Maya met her eyes. You are not at fault, she said. Take a breath. They cleaned methodically, 2 professionals doing simple work. Afterward, Maya wiped the counter as if erasing the scene, then turned back to the class. Take 5, she said. Close your notebooks. Stand by the window if you need air. If anyone wants to talk to me, I'll be here. A few students drifted to the glass doors that looked out onto the quad, where club tables waved and first years walked in hopeful pairs. Kareem approached, voice low. Dr. Jefferson, he said, do you need us to make statements? Because I will thank you, Maya said. If I need documentation, I will ask. Right now, I need you to remember that the rules we follow are the ones we make real for each other." He nodded, a seriousness beyond his age. When the break ended, Maya kept the lesson short. She did not pretend nothing had happened. Students are too smart for that, but she did not turn the room into court either. She reviewed the clean-up protocol. She invited questions about boundaries and consent in lab spaces, framing it as safety, which it was. At the bell, she dismissed them with a reminder that science is communal. When the door had shut on the last student, she stood very still and let the shake come to her hands. She waited for it to leave. Mr. Alvarez leaned his broom against the wall and took off his cap, turning at once. "You okay, Doc?" he asked. Maya nodded. "I will be," she said. "Thank you," he grinned sideways. "You ever need a witness, you call me. I've been a foreman. I know forms." She laughed, which she needed. "I was a medic," she said softly, "not a fighter. But I remember some things." He tapped 2 fingers to his temple. "Fights aren't always fists. That boy's got a rattlesnake coiled where most people keep their pride. You didn't kill it. You put a stick down so nobody else steps there." "Maybe," she said. He tucked his cap back on. "I've seen you be gentle with kids who don't deserve it yet," he said. "That's the right habit. But don't forget, gentleness has a spine." An hour later, Maya filed a conduct report that included the name of the custodian and the students who had already emailed to offer statements. She sent a note to the department chair. She printed out the lab policy and highlighted the paragraph on respect. She left a copy on the bench across the hall, where Todd had sat until the period ended, pretending, she suspected, to be the injured party in case a passerby could be captured as an audience. What she did not do, and this was the mistake, was let herself ask for backup. Not yet. The part of her that loved measurement believed the forms were enough. The part of her that avoided messy meetings told her to wait for the process to work. She did not call the dean of students. She did not convene her union rep. She did not gather her allies. That afternoon, a rumour skimmed across campus like an oil sheen. A black professor had jumped a transfer student for asking a question. By evening, a blurry photo of Maya, taken through the lab window, circulated on a private group chat with captions that wove disdain into certainty. By morning, anonymous comments had collected under a popular student forum thread. "She's overreacting. Woke thug. Reverse racist. I heard she put her hands on him." The words were not new, but repetition makes even lies feel embossed. The next day, Todd did not show up to class. He had, Maya learned from an email forwarded by her chair, filed a counter-complaint alleging physical intimidation. The email was neutral as a piece of plywood. The subtext was not. Maya stared at the screen for a minute, the cursor blinking like a metronome. She thought of the medic tent again, of how you could tell when a patient had crossed the line from pain to panic. She recognized that she had crossed her own small line. She needed counsel. She went to see Dean Patel, who had fought 3 Title IX battles and a dozen budget wars and kept her favourite plant alive by talking to it. Patel looked over the reports. She asked questions that proved she had read what mattered. "We'll take this seriously," she said. "You're not alone." When Maya stood to go, Patel added, "There's a visiting program this week in the community centre, veterans mentoring first-gen students. You might like it, and you might like them." Maya went. That evening, in a circle of folding chairs, she met people who had translated military training into other kinds of steadiness, a nurse who ran a free clinic, a librarian who used to repair radios, a chef who could gut a fish with the calm of a poem. They spoke about boundaries, like electricians talk about circuits. One older man, their informal leader, said something she wrote down and underlined twice. When a bully tries to turn procedure into a weapon, the answer isn't rage. It's better procedure. Better procedure, Maya repeated to herself on the walk home. She slept soundly for the first time that week. The following day, she took action that felt both tactical and kind. She emailed her class with a simple note about safety and respect and the fact that the community's strength was everyone's job. She invited anyone with concerns to meet during office hours. She scheduled a debrief with the chair, brought Mr. Alvarez to speak, and asked him to tell his story about the incubator and the pallet. She filed an amended report with additional student statements and the precise language of Todd's slur, cleanly, neither hiding nor embellishing it. At the end of that week, results day, she wheeled out the incubator like a cake at a party. The plates told the truth. The students who had respected sterile technique had the cleanest growth patterns. The ones who had cut corners had bloomed with fuzzy pollution. Science rarely gives you a parable that perfect, but when it does, you don't waste it. Observation, Maya said, holding up a plate purified by dull, honest steps. What you do when no one is clapping becomes a result anyway. The room was quiet and charged. She sensed gratitude gathering like rain. At the back, the door swung open. Todd walked in, late, without goggles. His eyes glittered the way a boy's do when he thinks the show is his again. He held a folded printout and a phone recording, and when he lifted them, Maya understood he had prepared a trap. He pressed play. On his phone, a muffled recording from the day of the incident spilled into the air. You could hear the clatter of glass, the soft hush of the class, Maya's firm tone. You will hand me the sharps container. Then a sound that out of context could be misread as struggle, the slide tray wobbling, a redirect, Todd's voice full of triumph. You assaulted me. He hit pause. He turned to the class. I've submitted this, he said. You can all witness that I tried to be civil. Play the rest, Mr. Alvarez said from the doorway. Todd stiffened. He hadn't seen the custodian there, arm folded, cap low. What rest? Todd bluffed. Alvarez lifted his phone with the gentle inevitability of a sunrise. I was under the hood, he said. I recorded the whole lab because the motor makes a strange whine when it's about to go. It did, but I also got life. Todd's eyes went hard. You can't. House cameras in common areas record audio when maintenance is logged, Alvarez said, a bland truth. Signs are posted. He looked to Maya. With your permission, Doc? Maya considered. Her training told her not to humiliate even when you could, but justice also loves daylight. Go ahead, she said. Alvarez connected to the classroom speaker, the room filled with the clean sound of the actual day, Todd's whisper slur, sharp as a tack, Maya's steady commands, the quick, contained pivot, Alvarez's soft, son, that's restraint. The recording didn't sensationalize. It captured a teacher bending a storm back to safety. When it ended, the silence was not empty. It was full of decision. Todd took a step backward, then forward. That was edited, he said weakly. Jules lifted her chin. It wasn't, she said. Kareem nodded. Several students murmured agreement. A stranger thing happened then. Two students Maya didn't know well, quiet kids, stepped slightly in front of her, as if being near her might turn them into facts. Mr. Alvarez crossed his arms and leaned his shoulder against the door jamb like a pillar. Todd looked around at the faces that had stopped being an audience and become a jury. For the first time, his mouth learned what it felt like to be dry. Pride had told him that truth was a costume. He just discovered that truth is a spine. Out, Maya said softly. He lingered one beat too long. The dead habit of someone who had always been allowed to test the alarm without consequences. Then he left, the door swinging behind him like a curtain dropping on an act. That afternoon, the Dean of Students emailed Maya to say the complaint had been dismissed and sanctions recommended for Todd for harassment and disruption. The message was written in administrative, But the meaning was plain. Procedure had worked because it had been made better. Maya sat at her desk and let her muscles learn the news. She wasn't triumphant precisely. Relief has a low music to it that victory doesn't. She stood, brewed tea, and watched steam write the soft future into the air. In the weeks that followed, the lab learned a new normal, not because it had been broken, but because it had been tested. Maya began every class with a ritual she had once considered too sentimental for a college room. 1 minute of quiet, eyes open, hands still, feet on the ground. She told them it was not a prayer, except a presence. We calibrate instruments before experiments, she said. We can calibrate ourselves too. Students who had previously rushed out at the bell lingered to clean up in the new way, not performatively, but as if the shared space were a person. Jules asked Mr. Alvarez to teach her how to change a filter. Kareem started coming early to set out goggles. The shy students who had hung back now raised their hands, their voices small but steady. In office hours, a few told Maya stories of their own. Cousins, coaches, bosses who made them feel like extras in somebody else's scene. They did not ask her to fix the world. They wanted to know how to step through it without shrinking. Maya, for her part, changed too. The flaw she'd named, her reliance on measurement, didn't vanish. But it evolved. She realized that leadership required more than form-filling. It needed a network woven before storms. She reached out to colleagues and found allies she had assumed were too busy or too distant. She asked a student affairs officer to audit her syllabus for clarity around conduct and care. She invited Mr. Alvarez to give a 5-minute talk in lab, once a term about Labber's kitchen, and she gave him an honorarium from her discretionary fund. "Don't make a thing of it," he said, but he smiled when he cashed the check. The veteran circle became part of her month. The older man with the radio hands told her a story about a confrontation in a refugee camp when no one raised a fist but everyone lowered their voice, and how that had won the day. "Sometimes you don't push the river," he said. "You guide the banks." She wrote that down too. News of the incident moved around campus the way news does. At first hot, then cooled, then embedded in the sediment of institutional memory. The anonymous comments didn't apologise, but they were outflanked by the weight of the recording and the testimonies. Some who had sniped quietly wrote her private notes of support. She smiled at those and replied with thanks that were true but not performative. She learned again that karma is not a metaphysical ledger operating outside human action. It's the sum of small, brave choices that line up until they look like luck. Todd met with the conduct office and disappeared into a fog of disciplinary processes. He reappeared weeks later, thinner around the eyes, his cap gone. He asked to see her. She said she would meet him in a room with a window and another adult present. He arrived with a letter. He read it haltingly. It was not good prose, but it was honest enough. He had believed control was owed to him. He had mistaken power for safety. He had let a stereotype do his thinking and almost learned nothing from it. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said finally. "I'm learning to ask better questions." She didn't absolve him. That wasn't her role. She told him that growth is real when it changes behaviour. She asked him to volunteer twice with Mr. Alvarez's crew. She told him to read a book she loved about humility in science. She suggested he apologise to his lab mates in person, not via text. He did those things. He didn't become a hero, but he practiced being ordinary in the right way, which is its own redemption. On the last day of the semester, the class gathered around the incubator one more time. The plates this time held something more ambitious than safety spores. They displayed the faint green fluorescence of a successful transformation, a trick of plasmids and care. The students cheered in the restrained way scientists do, by taking careful notes in excited handwriting. Maya closed the incubator and faced them. "Before you go," she said, I want to say 3 things. They were used to her lists. They quieted. First, she said, thank you for the way you have treated this room and each other. You made the rules real. Second, curiosity without humility is vandalism. Don't be vandals. Touch the world in a way that leaves it more precise. Third, the world will not always be kind. Sometimes it will be cruel in ways that feel like a dare. In those moments, remember that gentleness with a spine is stronger than noise. Remember that better procedure is a shield. Remember that you are each other's context, and context can save a life. She paused. Go make good mistakes. And when you fix them, tell someone how you did it. They applauded then, not for spectacle, but as the clean sound of completion. When they filed out, they left their benches immaculate, their goggles stacked, their notes folded with intention. Jules hugged Mr. Alvarez awkwardly, and then went red as a poppy. Kareem pressed a small, carefully wrapped gift into Maya's hand. A watch band braided from lab tape, the kind of sentimental craft that would have made her laugh another year and made her swallow this one. After the door clicked shut, Maya sat alone for a moment. She touched the face of her old watch. It ticked, unwavering. She thought about the medic tent, the fume hood, the swivel pivot, the filing of a form, the play of a recording, the slow, steady turning of a campus toward its better self. She breathed out. Calm arrived, an earned guest. Mr. Alvarez knocked once and stepped in. Filter's fine, he said, but I'll swap it next semester anyway. Good habit. Good habits win, she said. He tilted his cap. Doc, he said, you ever notice how a bully's noise sounds loudest in an empty room? She smiled. I do. Good, he said. Keep it full then. He left. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked down the hallway into an afternoon that smelled like lemon and possibility. Morale. Strength isn't loud. Real strength is calm, principled action that protects people while holding the line. When hate tries to turn rules into weapons, make better rules and live them. Call to action. The next time you witness a small act of bullying or bias, don't look away. Name the boundary, support the target, and document the truth. Your steadiness might be the difference between a wound and a lesson.